When this album was released, the critics really weighed in on it, and I was wondering, how bad is it really? Welcome Classic Rock fans for a short video. I want to discuss the Metallica album Hardwired to Self Destruct. Ever since their mainstream rock apotheosis, that was the Black Album, many feel they've faced a kind of a quarter of a century losing streak. Let's not forget the rather bloated rock of Load and Reload, the migraine-inducing clatter of St. Anger. I mean, those drums, what was going on there? And that's even before we get onto the Lou Reed collaboration. All this points to a band in serious decline. There were lots of reasons given for this decline: age, too much money, too much success, whatever it was. But this Hardwired to Self Destruct, this is a 2-disc collection. This album was an attempt to recreate those halcyon days of yore, thrash's primordial yop, so to speak. And this band was just a garage band. And this has been my kind of gym workout album this whole week. Hardwired to Self Destruct is Metallica's 10th studio album. It was their first in about 8 years, I think, following Death Magnetic in 2008, marking the longest gap between studio albums in this band's career. This album, of course, was produced by Greg Feidelman, I hope I've said that correctly, who engineered and mixed the previous album as well for Death Magnetic. Interestingly, in an interview with Classic Rock, Lars Ulrich said, what we're doing now certainly sounds like a continuation of that album.
When we started writing for Death Magnetic, and I've said this 1,000 times, there was I think a newfound appreciation of a band that was functioning. Basically what we were doing was we were just continuing where we left off with Death Magnetic in terms of the spirit of the songs and the process.
And I think he has a point. And the lyrics, interestingly, follow a general theme of nihilism and pessimism. Nothing new there in terms of Metallica. And even the title Hardwired to Self Destruct came from an utterance that Hetfield heard somebody say. But it brings in ideas of fate and predetermination, and implicit ideas like helplessness and hopelessness and desperation are also explored on this album. But regarding the lyrical themes on this album, as I said, Moth into Flame deals with the dangers of fame, and there's particularly addiction and overdose, but as well as familiar lyrics that concerned with H.P. Lovecraft. Dream No More, for example. And Murder One is a tribute to the late Motorhead frontman Lemmy, who died in December 2015. The song was actually named after the bassist's favourite amplifier. But I think it's quite a good album, really. I think it holds up well against the last 172 Seasons. I think everyone wants to judge Metallica by Kill 'Em All and Master of Puppets, which is a bit unfair, really. They're a band that kind of moved on since then. But with this album, you get disc 1, which seems to be very much old Metallica thrash, really. You get tracks like Hardwired, Atlas Arise, which was the single, I believe, Now That We're Dead, which has something of a Enter Sandman vibe to it. Moth into the Flame, Dream No More, Halo on Fire. Disc 2 gets all sludgy and almost Sabbath-like, almost like a homage to Sabbath. A lot of the critics say that it slows the album down and it kind of drags the whole thing. It loses pace and urgency and energy. I totally disagree. I rather like all the sludgy stuff as well. There's some nice melodic lines there as well. I'm not supposed to mention melodic lines when we talk about Metallica. Metallica nearly imploded during the recording of 2003's St. Anger, and this album, 13 years after that one, feels like a repudiation of the band's 90s catalogue. In the words of AllMusic, these were the years when Metallica shined up, slowed down, and got a lot weirder. But I like Metallica a bit weird and sludgy, as I've said. And the title track certainly sets the tone, where James Hetfield bellows, "We're so fucked and shit out of luck." It expresses a rage and desperation that is reminiscent of their 80s stuff, I think. We get the unleashed fury of Moth into Flame, slightly reminiscent of Battery. But to quote AllMusic once more, there's no denying that Metallica are an older band now, either incapable or uninterested in maintaining that intensity over the course of a full double album. When they slow down, it's not exclusively to churn and brood. I'm Savage interestingly draws a fine musical line between ominous dirge and intricate transitions that is strangely juxtaposed with Dream No More, that has a swing to it. Maybe Lars has been listening to Buddy Rich and Elvin Jones, who knows. The riffs might not be as arresting as the previous Metallica stuff, and some have criticised the production, describing it as monochromatic. But I think this is a fine album with an abundance of musicality and rage expressed within the performances. But I find the whole thing got an interesting smorgasbord of different sounds and textures. I mean, Atlas Rise, as I said, was a single. We get these soaring bluesy triplets, which are quite intriguing, to the rather fleet-footed stampede of Spit Out the Bone. Kirk Hammett's playing is really interesting on this album as well. In fact, I think the guy steals the show on this album, if I may quote Pitchfork, lending the otherwise one-dimensional mix undermined primarily by the anemic drum tracking, which renders Ulrich's bass kicks a little more than footsie taps, some welcome textural spontaneity. I don't agree with Pitchfork here. I think the sound of this album is most excellent, really. I quite like the production on this, and it needed to be good after the disaster that was at St. Anger. And we get 12 songs on here, the vast majority of which are kind of lengthy pieces, well, certainly beyond the 5-minute mark. And we get these galloping nods to Ride the Lightning. And that's before we get to the doomier in texture, at least, of the second disc, which is as I said, the more Sabbath-sounding stuff. This is very much a return to Metallica of old in many respects, a staccato, doomsday proselytizing that we got on those earlier albums. I think this is their best album since 1991's self-titled LP. Bold statement, I suppose. I'd even put this quite easily up there with 72 Seasons. I like 72 Seasons. In fact, I think I like this more than 72 Seasons, as the latter drags a little bit. You just think some of the numbers are drawn out unnecessarily. I don't feel that with this album. I know I did a Metallica ranking where I didn't rate this one as highly, but I've seriously reappraised this album since I've been listening to it this week. This is a pretty decent comeback album, on par with Weezer's White Album, I think. Anyway, let me know if you're interested in this album, if you've heard it, what do you think of it? I'd certainly be interested in hearing from you. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Metallica's Hardwired to Self Destruct, my latest Jim album. Anyway, if you're new to my channel, please do click like, subscribe and check that notification bell. It makes all the difference. And I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.